Murder in Akron, Ohio. A man is gunned down in cold blood.
The whole incident didn't even take 15, 30 seconds.
It was just blatant and brazen.
It looked like somebody knew what they were doing.
You make me sick!
The crime will lead police to the mansions of the wealthy and the secrets they hold.
They listen to the phones.
What's waiting for me there anyway?
Oh, you'll see.
It's a story right here. This little girl.
Can forensic science connect the dots and bring a killer to justice? This dramatic reconstruction is based on eyewitness accounts, police evidence, and court records. June 16th, 2001. Akron police respond to a report of a man being shot.
We have gunshot wound at BJ's Wholesale Club.
Where is the victim?
He is in his car at the gas station. A motorcycle drove up and shot him. He's got a gunshot wound to his face. He's bleeding profusely.
Is he conscious?
He barely.
When paramedics arrive, the victim is still breathing. He's rushed to hospital as detectives take their first look at the crime scene. The shooting has occurred in a major shopping area off a busy highway. It's a Saturday afternoon. There are thousands of people around. Investigators, including Detective Edward Moriarty and Detective Vince Felber, start putting the picture together.
What we were able to discover was that the victim pulled into the gas station, pulled up next to one of the pumps. He was almost immediately followed by a man on a lime green, black and white motorcycle. The suspect then got off his motorcycle, walked over to the victim's car, pulled out a gun, shot him. The shot went through his head, out his neck, and out the passenger's front seat window. The suspect then casually got on his motorcycle and took off.
Officers soon add to the description of the motorcycle, learning it is a high-end ninja-style bike built for sleekness and speed. The suspect riding it was hidden under a black helmet. But police receive intriguing accounts of how their killer exited the gas station.
One gentleman had seen the motorcycle cut off of Main Street and go between some buildings into a wooded area, which led into some train tracks. There was an access road back there, and that would be an excellent way to get away, miss all the traffic, and it led to the expressway just a couple miles down. So that was suspicious to us right at the beginning. One of our first assumptions that was possibly road rage, but the facts didn't really match that. It looked to us like somebody had intentionally killed the victim. Maybe this was planned.
Detectives Moriarty and Felber search the car for any possible evidence. They retrieve a wallet and can now identify the victim.
Jeffrey Zack. Z-A-C-K.
Jeff Zack is a 40-year-old local of Israeli descent. News soon arrives that he has died in hospital. The shooting is now a murder, and the hunt for clues ramps up.
One of our detectives just walked over to the driver's side window and looked through to the passenger side window and just walked that path. And sure enough, as he was walking that path, he found the projectile about 70 yards away. That was our only hard evidence at the time, and it turned out to be an important piece of evidence.
At such a sparse crime scene, the fatal bullet is a big find. Among other things, it could tell detectives what kind of gun they should be searching for. And the gun could eventually lead them to their killer. Moriarty also claims a tape from the security camera monitoring the lot, hoping it might offer some leads. But that's about it. It's not much to go on. To catch the murderer, police will need more information about their victim. On the case is Detective Bettina King.
Run him on the computer to make sure he's who he is, because the computer tells us, height and weight and things like that.
King gets a hit. Jeff Zack's got a record. His rap sheet includes 2 convictions for sexual misconduct. One of them linked to a prostitution ring using minors. And police had once been called to his home to break up a heated domestic dispute. Detectives wonder if Zack's shadowy past has finally caught up with him.
He hadn't done anything seriously wrong or to harm anybody, but might have created quite a few enemies. Detective King went to the home of the victim's family. Well, it's an extremely difficult assignment, obviously. It's very emotional. Her first job is to let the family know what has happened, and then hopefully to try to get as much information as possible.
I'm afraid I have some terrible news.
Brian, you better go upstairs to your room, okay, honey?
I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband was killed today. He was gunned down.
I can't believe it. I can't believe this would happen.
She is devastated. She said, that's impossible. That is totally impossible.
Bonnie, is there anyone who might have wanted your husband dead?
King doesn't know that the eventual answer to her question will shake the entire city of Akron and pit authorities against the most powerful family in town. Jeff Zack's widow presents a possible clue to solving her husband's daylight murder.
At that time, Bonnie tells me, I need you to listen to something.
Bonnie Zack told her about a call that they had received on their answering machine.
All right, buddy. You got one way out. So you need to start answering your cell phone, okay? I'll be talking to you. Or should I call, your mom and dad's house in Arizona? Answer the phone, boy.
When she first heard it, it scared her. It sounded threatening. And she said when Jeff heard the message, he all of a sudden seemed to get scared and frightened.
I said, well, so who do you think it is? She said, I have no idea. Neither did my husband.
Their son was also unable to identify the voice. But investigators are told of a recent conversation he had with his father.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah?
I gotta tell you something, and you gotta listen to me. If anything ever happens to me, you look at Ed George. All right?
Ed George, the owner of Tangier.
The Tangier is an Akron landmark, a Las Vegas star restaurant and entertainment complex. It's been in Ed George's family for years.
They were a very prominent family, very wealthy, very well-to-do. That was something that piqued our interest and our curiosity.
Ed's wife of 17 years is Cindy George. She's a devout Christian, a mother of 7, and she was once a finalist in the Mrs. Ohio pageant.
On the surface, it appeared as though she was, the ideal mother, and Ed was the ideal father. They seemed to have the perfect life.
Bonnie Zack tells police she and her husband crossed paths with the Georges 10 years ago.
Bonnie and Jeff were eating dinner at Tangier's, and Bonnie caught Jeff Zack staring at Cynthia George. And she basically told him, don't bother, she's way above you. And Jeff Zack took that as a challenge and said, oh yeah, watch.
Jeff Zack was not the type of guy who would just step down. He was a large man with a large ego.
Nice to meet you. How you doing?
Zack introduced himself to the millionaire's wife.
Jeff Zack was an interesting character. He was someone who could put on the charm, knew how to talk to people, but he also had another side to him. He had a hot temper. It wasn't above him to use somebody to get what he wanted.
It didn't take long for the two couples to connect. A chance meeting blossomed into a long-standing friendship. Jeff and Cindy grew particularly close, and Bonnie noticed.
I think the marriage between the Zacks was typical. It was people who were at one point very much in love, and as years grew by, I think that there was some distance there.
Then Bonnie drops a bombshell. She informs King that Jeff Zack and Cindy George recently ended a love affair that lasted almost 10 years.
As far as Bonnie knew, they became friends.
Touch wood.
It wasn't until later that she found out that Jeff and Cynthia were more than just friends.
If what Bonnie says is true, then the high-profile socialite Cindy George is intimately connected to King's murder victim.
We're just playing a fun game here.
In fact, Bonnie confides that Jeff was bitter and angry about the breakup.
You make me sick! I can't stand you!
But she doesn't know anything more. She gives King photos of Jeff and the Georges. And the answering machine tape is taken as evidence. Investigators now need to talk with Cindy George. She might be able to shed some light on who killed her former lover. King knows the Georges have money, but she soon discovers just how wealthy they are.
And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, it was a nice house, a mansion, actually.
The detective quickly locates something intriguing.
Here's this family portrait. And as I'm looking at the family portrait, I'm like, why is everybody in here olive skin, black hair?
This one right here.
Yeah. Except for Mrs. George and this little one right here. I said, y'all, this is a story right here, this little girl.
Cindy George looks as if she's on medication or hasn't slept in days.
Cynthia George,
What can I do for you?
do you know this man?
Yes?
We'd like to talk to you about the death of Jeff Zack.
She says, my husband's not here. Well, we want to talk to you. And then she tells us about a big family wedding, why he's not here. He'll be back later if you guys want to talk to him later. No, we want to talk to you.
Cindy proves evasive, and as the interview progresses, she becomes increasingly agitated.
No, just friends.
And you can tell that she was an educated woman. There was no problem with her speaking to us. But anytime we asked any specific questions about Jeff Zack or anything like that, her voice lowered.
We met at the Tangier's restaurant, my husband's restaurant.
How long have you known him?
About 10 years.
Has he ever been here on his own?
I don't feel comfortable talking about this without my husband here.
You kind of got the impression that, okay, he's like, what, the ruler of the castle or something, and we have to run everything past him?
Were you with your husband yesterday?
Look, I told you I do not feel comfortable talking about this without my husband.
Cindy George brings the interview to a sudden end.
She didn't want to go into anything except that they're friends with the Zacks. That's it.
I'm gonna make the call.
Detective Felber soon makes contact with Ed George.
Yeah, Mr. George. This is Detective Felber at the Akron Police Department. We understand you're acquaintance of Jeff Zack.
And George said, yeah, can you believe what happened? That's what I want to talk to you and Cindy about. You come to the station so we can and answer some questions for us.
Yeah, I can be there in 30 minutes.
Well, a half hour later, Ed George's attorney shows up and tells us that the George family will not be speaking to us.
Clearly, investigators are being stonewalled by one of the wealthiest men in town.
Anytime someone that's involved in a crime and they refuse to talk to us and instead send an attorney raises our suspicions.
Detectives wonder if the reason for the Georges' silence could be that one or both of them is responsible for Zack's death. Cindy has already lied to detectives in denying their romance.
No, just friends.
The fact that Jeff and Cindy were having an affair would be a motive for murder.
The team reviews the surveillance tape from the gas station, but is frustrated.
The videotapes that we had gotten from the cameras were just extremely distorted and almost not visible. Basically, what you could see was a ghostly figure. It was hard to even distinguish it was a motorcycle.
As the investigation heats up, more manpower is required. Detective Dave Whitten joins the case, chasing down associates of the Georges who might have information and investigating any other potential suspects.
Well, we attempted to talk to as many people as close to the Georges as we could, which was difficult because we were being shut down.
King digs into Zack's cell phone records, looking for links to suspects and witnesses. The team is particularly interested in finding out who left the threatening phone call on Zack's machine.
Answer the phone, boy.
The call came from a payphone located outside of a gas station. Again, kind of suspicious. Why is somebody calling from a payphone?
The ballistics report arrives. The fatal bullet was a copper-jacketed hollow point.
They couldn't determine an exact caliber, but they did give us some possibilities, class characteristics of weapons that could have fired that round.
As the investigation continues, detectives learn that Jeff and Cindy spoke constantly on their cell phones, even after the affair had supposedly ended.
So then once we got the phone records, we're seeing her phone number on his phone a lot, house phone and his cell phone. We had to go through every motive, but everything we did kept coming back to the Georges.
Authorities are able to subpoena the Georges' financial records, but are otherwise frustrated by a gauntlet of high-end lawyers. Everyone connected with the couple remains out of reach.
The Georges had sent word to their close associates, their friends, their families, that they're not to speak to the police about Jeff, Zack, Cindy George, the relationship. They were not going to cooperate with the investigation.
But finally, police succeed in landing an interview with someone intimately familiar with the Georges.
Several of those
Their former nanny.
there with Jeff Zack.
Is there anything else that you can tell me?
Well, it was pretty disgusting. I mean,
One of the first things she told us was that George, right after the homicide, had told her not to talk to us. But she was a very independent, strong-willed person, and she felt that if we had questions, she would answer them, and so she did. She was basically the closest person to the family that we were ever able to talk to. She basically helped raise the kids.
She paints a portrait of a meek, confused woman, dominated by a very aggressive Jeff Zack. Ed George was oblivious to the affair, spending most of his time at the Tangier. Zack was prone to showing up at the house at all hours. She tells detectives that Zack conducted the affair openly, in front of the children. She noticed that sometimes Cindy would come home looking as if she'd been roughed up. From what detectives have learned from Bonnie about Zack's hot temper,
Make me sick.
The former nanny's account rings true.
Now take your clothes off.
Detectives also learned that after the affair finally ended, Zack made harassing phone calls to the family, including several to Ed George.
Totally immoral.
King wants to know how Cindy could have allowed such a volatile situation to continue for so long. The nanny explains that Zack threatened to take Cindy's youngest daughter away if she left him.
Why would he do that?
Because he's the father.
Detective King always knew there was something strange about the George family photos. Now the nanny's story supports her suspicions. 6 of the George children are olive-skinned with dark hair, including 2 who were adopted. But the youngest looks much more like Jeff Zack. Needing proof that Zack is indeed the father, Felber approaches the Georges' legal team.
Well, hey, he's part of a murder investigation.
After 2 months of being rebuffed, detectives finally get a subpoena for a paternity test.
You better have good grounds, because you know I'm going to contest this.
And when those results came back, sure enough, the one child was fathered by Jeff Zack.
This stunning revelation strikes the team as further motive for murder. If not for weak and vulnerable Cindy, then certainly for husband Ed.
Putting all that stuff together, I think the police really knew that the Georges obviously had some information about this killing that they weren't sharing.
Detective Whitten reviews the possibilities.
We had certain facts that we could establish. They had an affair together. There was a breakup. There was harassment. Jeff Zack fathered one of her children. And that's about it. We didn't have enough to say that Ed George was a suspect. We didn't have enough to say Cindy George was a suspect.
Police theorize about who may have actually pulled the trigger. Cindy George had all kinds of motive to rid herself of her boyfriend turned tormentor. But all witnesses at the scene described the shooter as a broadly built male. Ed George had been cheated on for a decade and was raising a child fathered by Jeff Zack. It's an obvious motive, plus he better fits the description. But police can't put him at the scene.
We did ask Ed George where he was at the time of the crime. He was able to tell us that there was an incident at the restaurant at the time of the murder.
Investigators confirm Ed George's story. But Felber knows that even if he didn't pull the trigger, Ed could still be involved. For that matter, Cindy could have arranged a hit. Or the two of them could have acted together. In any case, a contract killing could explain the calm professionalism of the murder.
Someone may have been hired to do this killing.
But after months of investigation, all detectives have to go on is hearsay and conjecture.
We were stopped. We had no place else to go with the investigation, and it was basically dead.
Detectives need hard evidence to continue. If they want to prove one of the Georges hired a killer, they'll have to find the killer first. Months pass in the sensational murder case without any new leads. Then, suddenly, everything changes.
It was about a year into the investigation, almost to the day, that we really got our first big break.
You're kidding.
A man calls police and tells them he's dating a woman who knows the killer of Jeff Zack. Felber and Whitten are soon on their way to see the woman in question. Christine Todero.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about the death of Jeff Zack. Can we come in?
I was just kind of clammed up there for a while. And then
After they left, I decided that I needed to tell them everything that I knew.
Tadero tells investigators that Jeff Zack's murderer is her ex-husband, John Zafino.
John Zafino was kind of your roughneck, blue-collar guy. John was not exactly the brightest guy around, but he was tough.
She describes him as a violent man with a quick temper.
One of the stories she told us was how he had punched her son in the face and knocked him out. When she started yelling at him, he grabbed her arm, put it behind her back, and told her, "I'm going to break your arm." And then he did. We asked her why she thought that John had done the homicide, and she told us the story about how he had warned her about a white-haired Israeli. She told us how she had seen in the newspaper the story where Jeff Zack had been murdered.
I read the first paragraph of the article, and it described him as an Israeli. The guy had white hair. He was killed by a motorcyclist, and I just knew that it was John. I just knew it.
You think you can identify the voice on this tape?
I can try.
Whitten plays her the message from Zack's answering machine.
All right, buddy. You got one way out.
I just was blown away that he was that ignorant to record something on his voicemail.
It is definitely his voice.
Felber now has a pressing question for Tadero.
What difference would it make to your husband that Jeff Zack is seeing Cindy George?
Well, because he was seeing her too.
Chris Tadero was saying that John is dating Cindy George. She's having an affair with the hitman. It just didn't fit what we had initially thought.
Felber and Whitten get onto Zafino's friends and associates. They learn he hooked up with Cindy in the summer of 2000, a year before Zack was killed. They're told Cindy often gave Zafino money and bought him a cell phone to be used exclusively for talking to her. Perhaps Cindy, ignored by her husband and terrorized by Jeff Zack, turned to Zafino for comfort. And he had decided to save her.
I'll fix everything, don't worry.
Or could the portrayal of Cindy as a weak and dominated woman be wrong? Perhaps she was in control, and Zafino was acting under her very persuasive encouragement.
I have a little problem that I need you to help me with.
The detectives are anxious to get Zafino's cell phone records and anything else that might connect him to Cindy George. As part of their efforts, they put a hidden microphone on Chris Tadero. They send her to speak with Zafino, who already knows that police are interested in him.
They put one wire in my car, and they put one wire on my pants pocket.
She would literally be shaking. She was so scared to have the meeting. It was so stressful for her.
I didn't trust him. I was afraid of him.
The meeting gets off to a bad start.
They started talking, and then she noticed a little black box. She looked at it, she goes, "Well, what's that?" And John goes, "Well, that's a radio frequency detector to see if you're wearing any monitoring devices." Well, she grabbed it, threw it in the back seat, and said, "How dare you not trust me? I'm not the one you shouldn't be trusting. It's Cindy George you shouldn't be trusting." John never directly confessed. He never said, "I did it." But what he did say was, "Don't talk about it. The police are listening." He was extremely paranoid.
John would ask me, has anybody been around? Have any cops been around? Don't say anything over the telephone. They're going to be listening to all my phone calls.
There are things you can't know.
The conversation convinces detectives that Zafino is involved in the murder. As the team digs deeper, the evidence piles up. Police uncover Cindy George's maiden name on the rental agreement for Zafino's apartment. And his motor vehicle registration records show that he owned a motorcycle. Investigators track down the shop that sold it to him.
One of our investigators went out and interviewed the salesperson that had actually completed the sale with him. One of the things that stuck out in her mind was he said he wanted the fastest bike they had, and he made mention that he wasn't going to have it for a long time.
We were also able to find out that he paid cash, $5,287. The fact that he paid cash, we found to be interesting.
Searching the internet for a photograph of the vehicle's make and model, police hit pay dirt.
We ended up finding the exact motorcycle that he owned.
What they discover is an ad for Zafino's bike. It's for sale at a dealership in Pennsylvania. Felbert learns that Zafino drove the motorcycle there after the murder and gave it to another of his ex-wives.
He didn't have a ride back to Ohio after he did that. His ex-wife told us that he called his girlfriend Cindy and asked her to come and pick him up. Also, Cindy had given him some money for gas and for a hotel.
The case gets stronger. When police dig into Cindy George's bank records, they find a link to the motorcycle. She withdrew $5,300 just prior to when Zafino purchased it. The amount is only a few dollars more than what he paid.
So again, the connection between John, the motorcycle, Cindy, we're getting more connections and things are starting to come together.
Interviews with Zafino's friends and colleagues soon lead detectives to a trucking firm where Zafino had once worked, and to a man named Bob Cole.
One of the things Bob Cole told us was that he had sold John Zafino 2 guns.
Well, the first one was a Davis 32 caliber, chrome-plated with wooden handles.
According to Cole, Zafino returned to buy the second gun after losing the first one in the woods.
Said he lost it somewhere. Fell out of his pocket in the park or something.
You know what park he was talking about?
Somewhere, I don't know what park. I couldn't tell you what.
He had told John when he sold him the gun, don't do anything stupid with it, because John was talking about some guy that was messing with his girlfriend, and Bob Cole said he was afraid he was going to use that gun to do something to the guy.
Cole tells detectives the second gun was a .38 caliber revolver.
When we heard .38 revolver, we went back to the report that said one of the guns that could have killed Jeff Zack was a .38.
What about ammunition? Did you sell him any ammunition?
In addition to purchasing this gun, John had asked him, well, what's the best ammunition to use?
Yeah, I told him to buy copper-jacketed hollow point bullets for that one.
The bullet matches the same type that was found at the crime scene.
We got some really good information.
Cole goes on to tell Felber that on the day of Zack's murder, he and others were with Zafino at a car show. But no one remembers Zafino showing up before 1:30 p.m., 90 minutes after the killing. That's all investigators need to hear.
Hey, tough guy!
In September 2002, John Zafino is arrested. He denies everything, including that he ever met Jeff Zack.
We know you were there.
But the evidence keeps rolling in. The latest piece courtesy of a park ranger from nearby Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. She recognizes Zafino's picture in the paper and tells detectives a bizarre story that unfolded a few weeks before Jeff Zack was killed.
She had been making her rounds in the park late at night. She saw the car parked in one of the parking lots. It was empty. She saw that there was an empty gun case on the front seat and thought that maybe somebody was going to commit suicide in the woods.
Hello? Park Ranger.
All of a sudden, John Zafino walks out of the woods.
Zafino told the ranger he was waiting for his married girlfriend. When asked about the holster, he told her the gun it usually holds is safe at home.
She really didn't have any reason to hold him and let him go.
The ranger goes on to explain that 1 week after her run-in with Zafino, a mushroom picker found a gun in the woods, at the same spot where Zafino had been lurking. The weapon is turned over to Felber.
We were then able to show that that gun that was lying in the woods where John Zafino had been hiding was the gun that Bob Cole had owned and had sold to John Zafino, the same gun that Zafino said he had lost in the woods.
Come out of his pocket in the park or something.
Detectives try to fathom the significance of Zafino wandering Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area at night with a loaded gun, and how any of this could be connected to the death of Jeff Zack. Then, a search of Zafino's apartment provides the first piece of a fascinating puzzle.
We found that he kept in file cabinets some phone records, and they were for 2 numbers. The 2 phone numbers were just separated by 1 digit.
Detectives discover cell phone calls between Zafino and Cindy George, including the night Zafino was caught in the park. Investigators compare these records with Jeff Zack's cell phone calls from that same night and get a strange hit.
We had the phone records spread out before us. We just looked at each other and said, look at these records. This is Cindy. She's talking to Zack. She's got her other phone. She's talking to Zafino at the same time.
The cell phone records allow police to track their 3 players on the night of the park incident. John Zafino was already in the park with a gun talking to Cindy.
It'll all be over.
Simultaneously, Cindy was talking to Jeff Zack on a separate phone,
Where are you?
luring him to Zafino's location. All the interconnected phone activity paints a picture of what was underway that night. An orchestrated hit on Jeff Zack.
Jeff? John, are you there?
I'm here, babe.
Okay, stand by. Jeff, sweetie, where are you? I thought you were coming to see me at the park.
I'm coming as fast as I can.
Well, what's waiting for me there anyway?
Oh, you'll see. Okay, he's on his way.
That's right, baby. Keep working it. Get it here.
Okay, I'm on it. Jeff, sweetie, hurry up, all right? Because I really miss you. And I don't have all night.
I'm entering the park now.
I'm almost there.
That's right. It'll all be over soon.
Hello? Park Ranger. Damn, we're busted. Call it off. Call it off.
Jeff, sweetie, could you just hang on a sec?
Once the ranger stumbled onto Zafino, the plan unraveled. Further digging into cell phone records reveals that Cindy was in contact with Zafino during his purchase of the motorcycle.
We were able to see from the phone records, right before she withdrew the money, she was on the phone with John. Right after she withdrew the money, she was on the phone with John. Right after John purchases the motorcycle, he calls Cindy George.
And the phone records obtained from the day of Zack's murder prove explosive.
We were able to find out that John Zafino and Cindy George were on the phone about 7 minutes before the murder. And then more than 20 minutes after the murder.
John?
It's a beautiful Saturday, babe.
To the detectives on the case, it's apparent that Cindy George knew what was going on that day, and in the days leading up to the murder. The only problem, there's not enough evidence to charge her. John Zafino goes on trial February 26, 2003. It lasts 2 weeks. The jury quickly finds him guilty, and he's sentenced to life in prison. But in the eyes of many, justice has not been fully served.
Right after John's conviction, the prosecutors went to talk to the jurors. And one of the first thing the jurors asked was, why isn't Cindy in jail? Why wasn't she arrested?
For several months, reporters were constantly asking the police and the prosecutors, when are you going to charge Cindy? It was something that the public was demanding.
From that point on, we began trying to come up with more evidence.
For 22 months, authorities monitor Zafino's jailhouse correspondence. There's a lot of it, including dozens of incriminating letters between he and Cindy George.
I too would like to speak with you, if only a few words. We must, though, listen to counsel. God is also working through them, too. Pray for their wisdom. We cannot make one mistake.
When she says, pray for our attorneys, we cannot afford to make one mistake, I mean, that sounds like a cover-up to me. It sounds like, she's trying to keep John Zafino strong so that he doesn't break and he doesn't, cooperate with the police.
Also monitored, Zafino's many phone calls, detailing frustration with his lover and her husband.
I've had it now, that's it. So they're either gonna help me or else.
Okay.
If I start making phone calls, it's gonna happen.
Then, when police learn that George has actually paid for Zafino's defense team, they now feel they have grounds to arrest Cindy. Even with all his money and status, Ed George is powerless to protect her. But the twists and turns in the case aren't over yet. On November 14th, 2005, Cindy George goes on trial. She's charged with conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and complicity to aggravated murder.
All rise.
Armed with the most powerful lawyers in Akron, she forgoes a jury and the case goes before a single judge, Patricia A. Cosgrove.
Now I had the additional burden, not of just hearing the case, but of actually deciding the case, rendering a verdict whether or not she was guilty or not guilty based on the evidence. And that was a tremendous burden.
We know she was talking.
Detectives who dug into the case testify, poring over evidence painstakingly collected over the last 3 years. It includes the incriminating letters.
We must, though, listen to counsel. Pray for their wisdom. We cannot make one mistake.
And phone calls explicitly stating Zafino's demand that the Georges cover his legal defense.
Big lawyers, big ones. And they're gonna pay for it. Just tell them they're gonna pay for it. Call them, get the price, and tell the Georges, write a check.
But the heart of the investigating team's testimony is the telephone records that connect Cindy George to both of her lovers on the night of the park incident and reveal plotting between her and John Zafino to kill Jeff Zack.
I think they showed a very, very compelling picture that the defense had no explanation for.
It seemed obvious to us and obvious to the judge that they were trying to lure Jeff Zack into the park.
She is my partner, the mother of my children.
Ever the loyal husband, Ed George continues to stand by his wife and insists she's innocent.
I really couldn't say one way or another what he knew about her affairs. At some point, because of the hundreds and hundreds of phone calls that she received, a person of ordinary intelligence would begin to think that there's something more going on here than just a friendship.
Cindy George is portrayed by her lawyers as a naive victim, ignorant of the plans of others. They say she lived in fear that her youngest daughter would be taken away. She's a tragic figure, not a criminal one. After 9 days of testimony, it falls to Judge Cosgrove to decide which version of the wealthy wife and mother is the real one.
There was a great anticipation that Monday morning. Cindy George walked in. She appeared to be very relaxed, very confident. She's walking up to people, her supporters, and giving them hugs and telling them that everything's going to be okay.
And when I began to read my decision, you could just feel the tenseness in the air.
Judge Cosgrove addresses the first charge, conspiracy to commit aggravated murder.
I found Miss George not guilty of that offense.
There was a great outburst of cheering. Cindy George was very emotional, happy, hugging her attorneys. But then the judge interrupted everybody and said, hold on, I have one more verdict to read.
Based on the totality of the evidence produced at trial, the court finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Cynthia Rohr George, is guilty.
The court hereby impose a life sentence. Your parole eligibility will be at 20 years.
The tone turned from happiness to tears, and her kids were there to witness it, and they were very distraught by the verdict.
I can truly say my decision would have been no different had I tried this case this week or last year.
Cindy George is sentenced to 23 years for her role in the murder of Jeff Zack. A defense team immediately organizes an appeal. 16 months after being jailed for life, the Ohio Court of Appeals reverses her conviction, and she is freed.
Okay, stand by.
The appeal successfully argues that there is no way to know what Cindy George said in her conversations with Zack and Zafino. No proof that she was trying to lure Zack to his death at her new lover's hands.
Oh, you'll see. I know, it's gonna...
And nothing to say she had conspired with Zafino on the day of Zack's murder.
The ruling is just, it's unbelievable. I don't think the general public realizes how ludicrous and ridiculous this judgment is.
Certainly it was a shock to us that the Court of Appeals would look at the same set of facts that the judge did and come up with a different conclusion. That was a total shock to us.
The state's request for review is denied by the Ohio Supreme Court. Cindy George will never serve time for the murder of Jeff Zack.
She was tried and convicted, but the decision was reversed, so therefore prosecutors can't have a second bite at the apple, so to speak.
John Zafino is not so lucky. He cannot apply for parole before the year 2026.
Husband and father is gone. And no matter what happens to John Zafino, it's not going to bring him back.